Welcome to the ICC Pulse Podcast. I'm Bo Hansen, your host for Season 6. And guys, I've had a lot of great experiences hosting this year, but it's hard to beat what you're about to hear. At the Code Council's annual conference in Long Beach in October, I was honored to host a live episode of this very show. As many of you know, this year we've been celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Code Council, so we took time to talk about the past, the present, and the future with some amazing guests. And I gotta say, it was an interesting experience to say the least. We're set up in the middle of the expo center at a booth, and we're right there next to other vendors doing their thing. You got people walking around us, having conversations, and here I am having an in-depth conversation with three superstars in the industry. So first, we had Gerald Jones, who's an absolute icon and the namesake for one of the Code Council's most prestigious awards, the Gerald H. Jones Code Official of the Year. Then we had Serena Locke, and she's a permit technician for Jackson County, Oregon, and recipient of this year's Excellence in Public Safety Award. Then last but not least, Pete Roque was with us, and Pete is the National Director of Code Enforcement at Four Leaf Incorporated and winner of the 2024 Raising the Profile Award. What a group, what a conversation. I'm excited for y'all to hear this one. Let's get it going.
Generally, I've placed each of you in a bit of a timeline on this. We have past, present, and future, but let's not get too caught up in that because, to be fair, you each have had a role in the past. You are obviously here in the present, and I think what you've done in the industry is going to continue to propel us forward into the future. But Jerry, I want to start with you because, again, you were there at the inception. You were there at the beginning dealing with the pressure of forming one national code when we had three model codes out there. So how'd you get into this line of work? Tell us about those early days.
Well, I'd spent 20 years manufacturing metal buildings, trying to buy permits all over the country, and it was a pain. First of all, is there a code? What is it? Where do I find out about it? And who administers it, if at all? So after 20 years of that, I was rather reluctant to even become a building official. The opportunity, and I actually hired on as a building code engineer. And as a professional engineer, I thought, oh, that's something I ought to be able to do. Nobody said anything about zoning or signs or property maintenance.
All the things.
I thought we were going to talk about building codes. Well, you learn fast. And I think I would give credit to the organization, the city I joined used the Boca Code. We were right across the street from Kansas City, Missouri, who used the Uniform Code. So all of a sudden now I got overlapping codes to deal with. Boca started a bunch of educational programs. And so the first three weeks, I'm at a Boca conference learning how to be a building official. And I must give credit to Boca and their training programs for teaching me what's a building official. And using those principles, I didn't have to unlearn anything. I pretty much started out the way the book says it ought to be done.
Good.
And so I was fortunate. I had a boss that allowed me to do professional development. And so I was able to put together what I think is a very professional staff, and I think we cut a pretty wide swath.
Well, Gerald, thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. You said something when we were talking on the phone, preparing for this episode. You were talking about selling those buildings all over the country and how much of a pain in the butt it was.
Yeah.
You know, I relate to that coming from the contracting world and dealing with just one code. I can't imagine what it was like dealing with three at that time. So I tip my hat to you in that, being a part of that innovation on the front end. Thank you for what you did. And again, when we talk about our place in the timeline, obviously, you know, you were there at the inception, so we've got you somewhat attached to the past, and that I think that can be a bit of an ugly word. I think a better word for you is legacy. And just to prove that point, I mean, one of the awards that we have, the Gerald H. Jones Code Official of the Year Award, is in honor of you and what you've done for this industry. So
I was awed by that.
Man, we're incredibly grateful for what you've done and for what you continue to do for this industry. So I just want to say thank you personally for that.
Thank you.
And then shout out to this year's winner. Guys, we got a Texas recipient of the winner from San Antonio, Michael Strahan, City of San Antonio. Congrats to him. Astros aren't playing well. They're not in the playoffs. University of Texas got beat by Georgia. It's been a rough week for Texas, and so I needed that win. So I'm glad.
Texas is big enough you can take it.
We needed the win. So, again, congratulations to Michael Shannon, the recipient of this year's Gerald H. Jones Code Official of the Year Award. Jerry, thanks for being here again. We're going to come back to you in just a minute. Also with us today, we have Serena Locke. Serena, you're representing kind of the present here, and no pun intended, maybe a little bit. It's a gift to have you here. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
You also, speaking of awards, are a recipient of award this year, the Excellent in Public Safety Award. Talk to us about what that means to you and also how you got into this line of work.
I got into this line of work by accident. I used to work out next to the director of community development for Jackson County, Oregon, and she knew I wasn't happy in my current job. So she said, well, we have openings as a permit technician. You should apply. And I finally found my home in my 40s. For, the customer service, the public safety aspect, explaining why we have to do this process and why it's, so important. And it's not just us trying to be, in your business, that there's a real need for it. And I've been lucky that the Oregon Permit Technicians Association already had a chapter that I was able to join right away and network with other people. And there was a foundation for me to build off of. And I think that's a better definition of past is for foundation. Because without that good foundation, you can't build from it.
I want to pull on that thread a little bit, because you're right. Having people, a community around you that are in the industry and can help support you. I want to talk more about that in just a minute. But also I want to tell you a personal story because I haven't told you this, but I'm in the process of getting my CBO certification, and I've already taken the legal exam and the technical exam. I'm currently studying for the management exam, so if anybody has any tips on the management exam, I want to hear them. But I was studying for the legal exam, and I got on the Facebook group, Code Official Geeks, or whatever it's titled, and I did a quick search for tips on the legal exam and read some of the comments. And Serena, your comment was actually one of my favorite comments, and I'd like to credit you for me passing the legal exam for my CBO.
It was.
Do you remember?
I know exactly what it was. It's go through the glossary and put the page number that glossary.
Huge. Who do we have to talk to?
Yep, and I use it as I teach a class in Oregon on basically how to for permit technicians to get their certification, a test prep class, and that's one of the tips that I give is besides just tabbing your chapters. You look at the glossary and it says it's in Chapter 3. Well, Chapter 3 is 20 pages long. I don't have time to do that.
That's right.
I got 59 more questions to answer, and time's a-ticking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
My CBO certification one day will have thanks to Serena Lockwood. Also, last but not least, we have Pete Roquet joining us. Pete, you're kind of representing the future, and we're going to talk a little bit why, but I think the award you got, again, I'm just surrounded by award winners here. The award you got kind of points to that as well. Pete won the Raising the Profile Award. So, Pete, talk to us about what that means to you and maybe how you got it in your own words.
Awesome. So, one of the reasons why I began trying to raise the profile for code enforcement, and now it's women, permit technicians, anybody I can promote in our industry. It means a lot to me. Helping others, really giving back, actually is what I really think this industry needs and deserves. So that's what it means to me. I started maybe this back in 2006, where I started posting because I never saw code enforcement having a presence in the industry. You'd always hear about building officials or inspectors, but you never heard about permit technicians, and definitely not code enforcement. One of the things that we say about code enforcement, we're always the junk drawer of every city, and all the problems eventually come to code enforcement. But we also use the model codes, and we have the smallest books in all the model codes, whether it's the International Zoning Code or the International Property Maintenance Code. Ours is very tiny, but those books pack a powerful punch.
Yeah.
And for me, the more I get out there, the more I'm able to use these tools and promote the industry. I can tell you, it comes back to being able to apply that in a very compassionate form. And I think that's my role today, is teaching that compassionate code enforcement in order to help people comply voluntarily without having to use the enforcement branch, and more be of a public servant and be more of a representative of our jurisdiction. So for me, raising the profile, that's what it means. It means just going out there, being the best, promoting ourselves as people, but also promoting each other as an industry.
I love that, and you clearly take it seriously. I'm a big fan of what you've done with your work. You wrote a couple of children's books, right?
I did.
So I'm a children's book author too.
Awesome.
I don't think I've had as much success as you have, but tell us about that book. Go ahead and shameless plug it.
Oh, cool. So my book is called Code Enforcement Officer Lucas Cleans Up Our Street. And so the book was originally, when I created it, I go to a lot of the national night outs, and people say, oh, look, I want to be a police officer when I grow up, because I don't think anybody ever said I want to be a permit technician or a code enforcement officer or even a building inspector when I grow up as kids. We want to be the police officer, the hero, the fireman taking the kitty from the tree or catching a bad guy. Nobody says, hey, I want to be a code enforcement officer. So doing a lot of the national night outs, I'm able to see that we didn't have any tools to provide kids to know what we do, and we serve a vital role in our communities, because when I explain this to people, what actual code enforcement officers do is not only do we keep our neighborhood safe, but we make sure the buildings are safe, and they're clean. So, I actually grew up in the city of Long Beach here, and where I grew up no longer exists. It's called Chavez Park now, where all the transients kind of, sleep right now. They're camping there, and so I grew up in a substandard neighborhood, so that neighborhood no longer exists, and for me that was normal. And just seeing that and where I'm at today, and able to relate to people with those substandard conditions, I'm able to do my job a little bit better. So one of the reasons I wrote this book was to, be able to share with different people, like, hey, this happens. Kids are embarrassed of their neighborhoods. Our job is to make sure that they're not. So in the book, he meets a code enforcement officer, Lucas, who's actually my son's name. So in the book, really, the kid never has a name. So that was done purposeful. And the person that the character is after is actually a mentor of mine who passed away a couple of years ago. So I was never able to share that book with him. And the problems that the issues pose. For example, there's a little girl in there who's modeled after Rachel Patterson of Colorado, and she's embarrassed to have her friends over because she lives in a substandard property. He helps clean it up, and then at the end of the book, she's able to invite her friends over to come play, so she's no longer embarrassed. So that was the whole process. And when I wrote the book, I showed it to my son. He did not like the book at all. He's like, I don't get it. So we rewrote it. I gave him author's credit, and now he's the sole author for his classes. He tells everybody, I wrote this book. They're like, whoa. Yeah, so that was the book.
I love it. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
So we're here, we're celebrating 30 years, as mentioned, and that's really the meat and potatoes of this conversation. So I want to highlight some of those key milestones from the timeline. And again, it's really been a year-long 2020 theme for 2024. Sorry, tripping all over my words. And there's been several great resources that have come out. Jerry, I got a report. I did watch the video. One of the things Jerry and I talked about, he was like, you got to watch the video. It's really well done. And there's been so many good resources that really told the story well. They knocked it out of the park. They did a great job.
They did. It was an excellent review.
Yeah. So if you haven't watched that video, again, you can find it on ICC's website. We'll put it in the show notes too, so where you can watch that. It's a great, just storylined, quick video of really our entire inception of how it all came to be. But Jerry, I want to spend some time on that. Again, set the stage. How contentious were those early days? You get a little bit of taste of that in the video, but you were there. Tell us a little bit of what it was like.
Well, remember that each of the three groups were generated by dedicated building officials who decided they had to network with their fellow surroundings in order to have a voice. So all three groups were organized by a network of individual building officials. They created an organization that they could work cooperatively in, and generally a little later, then they developed a code. BOCA, for example, was created in 1915, didn't write a code till 1950, but they were cooperating and energizing each other during that time. ICBO wrote a code right away, and their people were dedicated to that book. BOCA had several presidents who didn't use the code because they were there before the code. And so there were different cultures between the three organizations. It took a lot of head knocking, but the pressures from outside kept building. Think about the industry representatives, wood, iron, steel, concrete. They had at minimum of 6 code change hearings to go to, because we each had 2. So they had to go to 6 different meetings, plus any ad hoc meetings that might come along. The design professionals didn't know who to deal with. FEMA could not concentrate contracting with any one of us. There was no central location where people from the outside could concentrate their time and effort. And we were fierce competitors, even though we were cooperating with each other. Through the cooperation of the presidents, we actually developed the first 1 and 2 family dwelling code in association with the American Insurance Institute. So the first editions had all 4 logos on it. Well, when CABO finally got created, we put a CABO label on it. The voluntary actions by the presidents went so far, but invariably an issue would come up and they'd say, well, I got to take that back to my board. I don't have authority to do this. So we finally said, bring your board. So all 3 boards met together in O'Hare Airport. And that was the beginning of what we call the Council of American Building Officials. And it was a meeting of all 3 boards. Now, Southern had a small board, ICBO had a big one. So that meant 1 vote per organization. And it had to be unanimous or it didn't move forward. And so it took, I refer to that as the Articles of Confederation that the U.S. had. The states wanted to cooperate, but they weren't willing to give up their authority.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of in the same boat. We're willing to cooperate as long as it goes our way.
Well, and you in particular, geographically, so you had, correct me if I'm wrong, you had BOCA in the Northeast and Midwest, and then you had the Uniform Building Code in the West,
right?
And then the Southern Building Code, obviously, in the South. And so you're in Kansas City.
I'm in a suburb of Kansas City called Overland Park.
Yeah.
It's one of the fast-growing suburbs.
So really smack dab in the middle of it all.
Right now, I'm 3 houses in Missouri. The state line is 3 houses away.
Wow.
So the contractors, you know, they had to know what we were going to do. I had to know what the Uniform Code said as well as I did the BOCA Code. And each one had some unique twist to it,
right,
which was an advantage for various things. So it was fun.
Well, what about some success stories from those early days? You know, again, it was probably political, a lot of contentious moments, as we mentioned, but I'm sure there were some success stories along the way that are notable.
Well, yeah, there's so many individual ones, it's kind of hard to sort one out. But the Hyatt collapse in Kansas City was one where it highlighted the fact that the Kansas City Department was disrespected by the public. They were buried deep in Public Works Department right after weeds, rats, and trash. There was no morale. They moved them to an abandoned Kroger store. So the staff got the impression nobody cares what we do, so why should we? Well, after the Hyatt collapse, it was determined that they didn't make any inspections. And so they managed to call me because I had pretty success across the street. But after I looked at what was there, I saw time after time where the building official had referred actions up to the Director of Public Works and they got pigeonholed. So it was not a functioning department. So when they asked me to come over, it was on the condition that I be a department head, and I bought 75 cars, I bought new job descriptions, professional certifications, and was able to build a department that could function like it was supposed to.
Beautiful. And Serena, how long have you been in the industry?
8 years.
8 years. Okay, so talk to us about ways being a member of ICC has benefited your career. I mean, over those 8 years, you've probably got a few certifications, or you're a part of
this
permit.
time just have one certification. I'm a certified permit technician.
And a part of the community.
And a part of the community. Yeah, I'm a chapter president for the Oregon Permit Technicians Association and for Permit Technician. I'm an active member in Region 2 in the Southern Oregon chapter, and I support all my local groups also. But getting that networking experience to get that, I don't know how to do something, how do I do this? Because I work in a small rural jurisdiction. It's only large by area, but there's not that many people there. And my first introduction to how great the networking ability that permit techs have was we got our first apartment complex, and I did not know how to permit it and how to create the permit, what kind of permit was it. And I reached out to the Permit Technician Association of Oregon and said, what do I do? The people I work with tell me that it's a dwelling permit, and you just, put in more bathrooms and more kitchens. And I'm like, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem like what it is. And they're like, no, it's this commercial structure permit. You do everything else. And I said, thank you for reaching out. And I still actually, 6 years later, have a connection with that permit technician.
That's one of the directions I wanted to go, because a lot of times, code training versus on-the-job field experience, they're two totally different things.
Yes.
And I watch the permit techs in my office, and, man, what they deal with on a daily basis, going up to the counter, and, you're hit with a new problem every time you turn around. And so you can have all the certifications in the world, but actually getting in there and learning it in the deep end, that's an entirely different thing. So one of the things I want to highlight also that ICC now has is, we're at the conference. One of the best things about being at a conference is networking and getting to meet folks like you guys. But the digital footprint of ICC has gotten better. There's the new member community and the mentor program. And so taking advantage of those things, Serena, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's so important. What would you say, again, I mentioned my permit techs in my office. What would you say to them? Some of them are very new in their career. What would you encourage them as they continue in their career?
I encourage permit technicians very much to get their certification. It shows us the what and the why and the how for our jobs, and it also gives you the confidence that we can learn more. We're not just the customer service in the office. We have the ability to learn. We have to manage a lot of different things at the same time. We have multiple projects going on. But once you get into the code books, you start to see that you can read it, you can find that. You don't have to be certified to plans examiner to say, you need to know about the windows and how big they have to be. Go to Chapter 3, and you can show the customer, who could be a homeowner or a contractor, this is where you go, here it is, look it up. If you have more questions, let us know. But you gain that confidence in saying, I know where it is in the book, because we can't do their job for them,
right?
But we can tell them where the information is. And without that certification and that process of learning that there are code books and that you can learn and can progress and make your career what you want it to be, they can't. They don't know about it.
So I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You're actually opening up the code book at the counter with folks?
No, I use the digital codes available online.
There you go. Good plug. But that's awesome.
But we do have the code books, and sometimes we print them for people. I print Chapter 1 all the time. I've got for especially like what type of building do I need or not need a permit for. I use that all the time at the counter. I show the counter. I train the new permit techs in our office to use the code books.
And not just saying you need to speak with a building official or a building inspector. I love that. That's incredible.
No, we get the plans examiner that is in the office with us. He comes out and tells the customer that what the permit technician said is right.
Right.
Because they usually want to hear it from somebody else, and then he repeats. He asks the question of what did they tell you, and he tells them that we were right. Or if we just don't, and like there's a lot of the code I don't know, I just say, well, let me get the plans examiner, he'll be right out. and then he talks to him.
Yeah.
It's about working in the building department. I can tell you the building techs, the permit techs, they're the front line. They're the Marines
Absolutely.
of any department, because they're the first ones to get the contractor, and somebody didn't pass an inspection. They're the ones that take the hits, even though they had nothing to do with the inspection. But they're the ones that get the phone calls and field those calls to the building official.
So, Jerry.
Can I tag on to
Absolutely.
that? I haven't heard anything at any of the conferences about this, but you have a constituency of involuntary people. The contractors don't really want you in the game, but they are. The construction industry does not like surprises. If they know something's coming, they can usually deal with it. So I found it very important to go to the meetings of the General Contractors Association.
Right.
Go to the home builders' local meetings. Let them get to know you, and you get to know them. And if something's coming down the road that's going to be a major change, you get on top of it and call them and describe what's going on. And then it doesn't take them by surprise. And generally, if they have some real serious input, then you could run the input back up line and maybe affect the code change. But you're a member of the team, whether you like it or not.
Well said. And going back to what you said earlier about building that team in the office,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how valuable was a permit tech, or it was more than just you, right, when you built that. And so how valuable was the team side of things?
Well, I think one thing that kept you on a level keel was we aren't designing anything. We're not building anything. We are simply seeing that everybody else does their job. Did the architect and engineer design it right within the code? Did the contractor build it within the code? Make it like the damn drawings for once. And if you have a good Board of Appeals, you can deal with almost anything. I don't care what regulation it is, there's got to be something to bend once in a while. And if you have a good, credible Board of Appeals with professional engineers and architects on it, then they can carve out a variance or a modification if necessary. Achieve the intended safety goal. But there's 10 ways to get there.
Right. Love that. Pete, let's talk mindset real quick. I see you, brother, on LinkedIn. You've got a great following. You're doing great things out there, influencing. Talk to me about mindset and just what drives you and what gets you going in this whole industry.
Sure. As I grow older, I actually see that I'm more of a public servant mentality, and getting the next generation of people into code enforcement or building inspection or permit technicians. I think that's the role of providing a pathway towards something bigger. And when we're doing this, you'll see our roles evolve. Permit technicians might have been seen as administrative before, now they're more technical.
Yes.
And the way they explain things, it's incredible. Whether it's a male or female, it doesn't really matter nowadays. They have the same technical prowess that everybody else, if it's in the code, they can explain it to you just like a male or female. And just watching the evolution of our industry is just so mind-blowing to me, and I love promoting that. I love when I see it, I have to promote. I promote people I don't even know, but I see they're doing great stuff, and I feel everybody needs to know about it. Because if you see somebody doing it, when you talk about mindset, it's about just changing that if you can think it can be done. And I think if you do it, you start breaking those barriers. People are like, oh, I remember the first time I did a podcast, a webcast, somebody called me and said, you look ridiculous and everybody's making fun of you. And it totally hurt my feelings. But today, I'm sitting here with you guys and doing a digital podcast. This is an incredible thing. So I think the mindset changes is if you become the change maker and people follow suit, then they become the change makers. And I think that mindset just carries. You pay it forward. And I think that's been my biggest reward in doing all this social media influence. I don't consider myself an influencer, but I've been told I am, so I'll take it and I'm run with it.
Well, I would like to say, as a person who's received the positivity and the support from Pete. It energizes you. It continues to make you passionate. I realized a few years ago that this became my hobby. I didn't know that promoting building safety and the role of permit technicians would be my hobby. It's not what I thought I would do, but it is definitely a passion. And having supporters, whether it's Pete finding your post and resharing it, your building official that supports your training efforts, supports you being on chapters, and then nominates you for things, all of that makes a real difference. And having that positive support makes you just want to continue to grow and be the best person that you can be.
And I think when you're moving forward, you always have to respect the past. You know, when I'm hearing, I'm sitting here next to the first ever code official, the person. I'm sitting next to the man. You know, you really have to sit here and you just have to sit here in awe and say, you know what, our industry needs to know where we came from, because in order to move forward, you have to like kind of realize what the mistakes of the past were in order to make change and do better. You know, whether, you know, back then you didn't have a lot of, you know, there's been barriers that have been broken over and over the years. And today we see those barriers and we say, wow, what other barriers are going to break? You know, now you're talking digital and virtual inspections, you know, digital codes. I mean, you're talking so many things, and our industry just keeps changing and evolving, and somebody has to keep breaking and molding that change. And, you know, I didn't know Serena years ago. And you know what? Today we're working on helping promote women in code enforcement and development. You know, I'm over here saying, hey, how do I promote the permit technicians? How do they promote code enforcement? I think that's an interesting thing.
Again, shameless plug for this podcast, last episode that just dropped. If you didn't listen to American Plumber Stories and the story going on there, they're doing exactly what you're talking about. And that was the tone of the conversation, the big driving home point of how do we reach the next generation? That is a huge question. And historically, something we've done pretty terribly at, just whether it be plumbers or code officials or whoever it may be, is sharing how big of a deal what we get to do is. You know, the thing that marks millennials, I'm a millennial, so I can talk maybe a little bit poorly about millennials, is, you know, we want to change the world. We want to be difference makers, right? Well, here comes a career path where you actually get to be a part of something that matters, making a difference in your community, attached to such a legacy. I mean, what better career path can you pick than this? So yeah, we have to be better at telling that story, and that's something, again, shameless plug, American Plumber Stories is doing a really good job at, and we have to get better at. So Pete, thanks for what you're doing. We need more storytelling in the industry.
So I think using the digital media and social media platforms is talking the language of the millennials and the new, because, you know, my son's a millennial, and my son, he communicates a lot through the internet. So his interaction person to person is very limited. And I think when you're able to speak to somebody in that digital format and they're able to understand it and maybe come out of their shell. I mean, my son's now he's a code enforcement officer, so he talks to people at their door. He couldn't do that 5 years ago. Today he can do that. Same thing with building inspectors. The trades are coming back. You know, the days where, you know, you had to spend 4, 5, 10 years in college to get a degree. You know, now we're in high demand need of electricians, plumbers, building inspectors, code enforcement officers, permit technicians. We need those roles. And, you know, if we're able to communicate how awesome this career path is, I think, I mean, the sky's the limit for these young folks.
Well, early on, the term building inspector kind of implied somebody on the take. That's all you saw in the movies or TV. If they wanted to show corruption, it was a building inspector that was the example. About the time I got into business, we began to talk about, let's use the term code enforcement rather than building inspection. And simply they hadn't had time to muddy the water yet. But it was a different term, and it covered a broader scope than just inspecting buildings. And that takes nothing away from the traditional building inspectors, but they got a bad rap. And sometimes words matter. And so what we were trying to do, and I think is accomplished. Code enforcement still has a ring of regulation to it, but that's really what we are. And code enforcement covers broader than just the building. And so public relations-wise, it's always going to be a problem. You're not the most popular department in the city either. The mayor only hears from complaints from what you did. Nobody pats you on the back to the mayor and says, oh, look what a good job codes did. But the minute something is controversial, it comes down. I always told my inspectors, I want to know the worst first. If there's something out there, I want to go tell the mayor about it. I don't want him asking me about it.
One of the things we're trying to do a better job of, I mean, that's why I'm passionate about this podcast and just personally telling stories like this and having more of these opportunities where we can share this kind of material, reaching the next generation. And so, Pete, you know, as we transition to the last segment and talk more about how we can do that more, maybe not just digitally, but like you were talking about, Jerry, of just that words matter, but also those relationships in our office matter. And so, obviously, Pete wrote the children's book, but more than that, personally, talk to us about the mentorship side of things and how you're working with real relationships in your community to help pull them along in this career.
Sure. So currently I teach at Santiago Canyon College. So I teach code enforcement on, you know, how to do code enforcement, how to be compassionate, how to be a partner versus an enforcer. And it starts, a lot of times it starts from when the kids are little. You give them a coloring book, you give them a sticker saying, hey, and you explain what you do. They get excited about that stuff. And you know what? I remember when I was a little kid, we just had the big shakeout. And, you know, we remember little kids, you drop down and put your head. You remember those things, those little movies and videos. When we do that today and we reinforce code enforcement, building inspection, our building trades, we reinforce at an early age and keep reinforcing in middle school and high school and even college. People tend to understand what we do, and it gives them a pathway. So I think it starts at a very small age, very young age. I think if we do that, you know, that's our responsibility as, you know, building industry folks. If we do that at an early age, I think we get more bang for our buck, and we won't have this void of people. Like, I don't ever remember anybody coming to my school and saying, hey, this is a career option. But if we're doing it now, and I'm doing it now, I have my 9-year-old that tells me I want to be a code enforcement YouTuber when I grow up. And I go, there's no such thing. But you could be a code enforcement officer.
Well, see, if we do our job right, you don't have bad fires. Firemen can play Pinot.
Well said. If we do our job right, yeah, that's exactly right. And again, hanging my hat on something you said just a minute ago about how important words are. Pete, I heard you say, you know, partner versus enforcer. Again, just that small culture shift of we're coming alongside you in this process for the sake of a community. That's huge.
I would agree. You know, there's a time when I do actual code enforcement. When I talk to the property owners, I received a concern versus a complaint. Because people will always say, who complained on me? They will never say, who concerned on me? So I think that's a little twist. And when you say words matter, they definitely do.
Well, I don't want to change the subject, but code changes are like the rock tumbler. You know, if you want to polish a rock, you put it in this tumbler full of abrasives, and it keeps tumbling until it comes out polished. The code change process knocks the rough edges off, and you look for unintended consequences. I don't know how many times we've sat there with a committee and developed a procedure that we thought was perfect. The minute it hits the street, somebody finds a loophole, and you blow the whole thing out of the water. So the importance of the code change development process cannot be overstated. And I'm a little concerned that when things are running smooth, the average building official doesn't necessarily think he has to extend himself.
Yep.
Things are best when people are engaged.
Agreed. Go ahead.
And that's what I wanted to build on with how we're going to such a more digital world. Even for me as a permit technician, I noticed that less and less contractors actually come into the office to purchase their permits. They do it all online. They'll submit everything online, so we don't have that opportunity to make that connection. And I think that us as building officials or code officials, we need to do better at reaching back out to our local home builders associations so that we can have that conversation of, what are we missing as government officials or code officials in their permitting process? What do you need from us so that we can make sure that we save time and money? Because that's the bottom line. We want people to be safe, but they want to save time and money.
And I think with the permit technicians, they get the immediate feedback at the counter.
Oh, yeah, we know right away when they're happy or not.
Y'all are bringing up extremely relevant points. I mean, we're here at the conference. This week, they're doing the code hearings for the 2027 codes, which just blows my mind because we just adopted as a municipality the 21 codes. I just got in the mail the 24 significant changes, which I'm eager to read, and here we are already talking about the 2027 codes. And so, my goodness, I can't keep up. But it's important that we have this continuous cycle. Serena, you hit on something about just the importance of permit techs being involved in things like the Homeowners Association. Again, that's historically just the building officials that are going to that, or just the building inspectors. So is that something you go to? And
it's something that I'm developing through the Oregon Permit Technicians Association chapter. We are creating a presentation. It was from the permit technician from the city of Medford that she does a realtor presentation for continuing education about what requires a permit, what doesn't require a permit. She, through our network, loaned us that presentation, and so we're adopting it and updating it, or not updating it, but we're tweaking it a little bit so that we as an organization can share with any other jurisdiction, hey, here is this presentation that you can give to your city councilman, your county commissioners. We're hoping to present it to the state of Oregon, if not to the governor, to one of her subordinates before building safety next year. And it's called Honest Advice for a Homeowner. Like, why is it important to permit your water heaters? Like, it's just a replacement. Like, things happen. Or, why is it important to permit your garage conversion? What steps, what do you need? We're here as the third line of public safety, and we have to inform them why it's important to us, why it's important to them.
When you think about the future of permit techs, what gets you excited?
That the sky's the limit for the permit technician. You can make being a permit technician your career and be absolutely amazing and have the customer service and all of the knowledge, but be a great presence for your building department. Having that educated person there and knowledgeable saves so much time and effort. But if you would like to continue on your career goals and development, you can be an inspector, you can be a code enforcement officer, you can be a building official, a plans examiner. You can do anything you want. You have received the foundation as the permit technician for the work you're doing.
Love that. Go ahead.
And I think one of the things I see in the permit technicians in the future, as it becomes more technical, people will always tell you that building permit technicians are most important people in the building department, and I agree. The pay isn't always it doesn't meet what that description is, and I think with certification, with more, when a collaborative effort, standardization across the United States, I think that can be a goal similar to building inspectors and building officials.
It was definitely a goal of mine.
Love that. Jerry, I want to give you the last word. What is your outlook on the industry when you look at where we're at today?
Well, I've been out of the active work so long that I don't want to make a prediction there. I would say my cautionary note about complacency is something that needs to be paid attention to. It's very easy when things are rocking along to just lay back and let somebody else do it. So I think from past experience, you need people engaged, and they get engaged when there's something to be accomplished.
I love that. That's one of the notes I took from our time on the phone together. Established organizations. Again, we're here celebrating 30 years. All the bells and whistles. We've got a well-oiled machine in ICC now. and it can lend itself to complacency. I think that's very wise words from you. I appreciate that. Innovation, you were talking about, those early days. Innovation was happening when y'all were scrapping to have one national code.
Yeah.
It mattered, and y'all fought for it. So thanks for that. And again, to your point, may we never lose that and become complacent in the process.
And you notice it didn't happen overnight.
That's right.
It was several years after the ICC was created. It was several years before they were running smoothly.
Yep. All right, we're in the bonus round now. I got 2 questions for y'all. I'm gonna throw out one that's it's a softball. You know what's coming. Favorite building. So if anybody wants to take that, but also yesterday we're sitting here. We're in the expo center of the conference, and someone walked up. A new friend of mine, Christopher, if he's around. Christopher asked the question. He said, "How would you define diversity?" And then I'll add to his question, why is it important in our industry? So there's 2 softballs tossed out there. How would you define diversity, and why is it important in our industry? And then the other one I want to hear from one of you is, what's your favorite building? That's a tradition of the podcast, and why? So there's 2 questions. Who wants to take them? It's open to anybody.
I'll jump in on the favorite
I gotta
building.
think about that a little
Okay.
bit.
I found it last year, sort of more of a structure, but when we were in St. Louis going through that arch, that thing was so neat. That was fun. I've toured Hoover Dam and a couple other structures like that, but that arch was super cool, and the whole, how they had to construct it, and then watching the videos about those guys when they're up there with no safety harnesses at the top of it trying to put it together just freaks me out.
I'll answer the diversity one. I think that there's a place for everybody here. I don't think I should have been here. A couple years ago, I was at a League of Cities conference, and I went to a restaurant, somebody I went to high school with, and they told me, I thought you would have been in jail or dead because of where I grew up in. And today, I can say I sit among some of the very best in our industry. And I think that, whether it be a woman, a permit technician, building inspector, it doesn't matter. I think there's room for everybody here because everybody needs a home and everybody needs a safe community to live in. And I think that diversity is important for us. That this is my definition.
When you're dealing with plans and specifications, they're pretty specific, and it shouldn't matter really who's looking at them. So diversity means different things to different people, and if you're doing purely technical, it shouldn't matter at all. But when you get into interpretive things, that's when you need the broader viewpoints from everybody. We get settled into a routine and engineers think linearly, and the world is not linear. So you need to have the other influences where it can be applied. But just hard, cold facts of plans and specs, there's not much interpretation to be done.
One of the things I was reading about as I was preparing, I think it's in building department admin. You might remember this. It talks about department accreditation versus individual certification. And when I think about the future, hearing what y'all are talking about, that's what gets me excited. The team mentality, but also more than just a team where one person does all the things and you just have supportive roles. No. The whole team is qualified and able to answer some of these technical questions and raising the bar across the industry. That's what gets me excited, just a whole department accreditation. I hope that's what the future holds for ICC, less individual certifications and more well-rounded departments. Well, any closing comments?
Well, I'd like to answer the diversity question. I think part of the importance of the diversity, you absolutely require it because everybody's experiences and perceptions are different. And if you don't have a diverse background of people
right.
inputting information in there, it's just the same thing recycled over and over. And then we're astronauts drinking weird water in space. So you need all of those different points of view and experiences, and you can't get that from the same pool.
Got it. I'll write that one down. That's new for me. Well, guys, we'll end on that note. Thank you, Serena, for that. Again, outro, I want to invite you to watch the video. If I can invite you to do one thing, Jerry, that was great advice. I took time to actually watch it, enjoy it, And it was a walk through history, and it was really well done. Again, this is a special live episode. I want to invite you to subscribe and catch up on past episodes if you haven't done that. Our most recent episode was American Plumber Stories, where we got to talk with that group and what they're doing. Really incredible stuff, not just in Australia, but in Maui with what was going on with the Maui fires, and Canada. Really incredible stories going on there. But join me next time where I get to sit down and discuss the Jedis of our industry, because we're going to be talking with master code professionals. And I'll tell you, I was not too motivated to go for my MCP before that episode, but now that I had those conversations, man, those guys and girls are incredible. Really, really good conversation there. So join us next time for that. And then remember, in these knowledge-driven conversations that we get to have every single day, people don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. So let's be quick to listen, slow to speak, and we'll meet back here next time for the ICC Pulse Podcast.